We're going to call the meeting to order, and Ashley will do roll call.
Julia Fishback. Ellen Ermis.
Here.
Ann Duhan. Ryan Ramirez. Julianne Orgish. Erica Ibarra. And we do have a quorum.
And the time is 6:02. We'd like to consider approval of the Parks and Recreation Board meeting minutes of January 13th. A vote? All approve to approve the minutes? The Parks and Recreation Board welcomes citizen comments early in the agenda of the Parks and Recreation Board meeting. Those wishing to speak are encouraged to sign in before the meeting begins. Speakers may be provided with an opportunity to speak during this time period on any agenda item or any other item concerning city business, and they must observe the 3-minute time limit. Any public comments? We'll move on to staff reports. We'll be receiving a report, holding a discussion, and providing staff feedback on programming and concepts for the new facility at 1500 Daisy Lane. Will Atkinson and Chris Escoto.
Yeah, no, thank you. Will Atkinson cannot be here right now. He's going to join us later. But Chris Escoto, Parks Deputy Director, excited to talk to you about this item. This has been something that Council recently approved a contract to authorize Brinkley Sergeant Wingington, who will be here today talking to you about this item. This project is a recent property that the City of Kyle recently purchased. And again, we're excited on the various recreation support that this facility will bring to the City of Kyle. So pleasure to introduce Stephen Springs to the podium.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. We're excited to be involved in this project. I'll preface this by saying we're very early in it. You'll see some things that look like floor plans when we're going to the end, but I'll explain that. We're really not floor planning yet, but it's an existing building, so we can't help but get ahead of ourselves a little bit just to further the conversation. A little bit about Brinkley Sargent. We are, well, I thought it was working. How do I advance it? Next slide. The dongle's not in here, so I guess it's somewhere. I'll turn it off and on again, see. Well, I get a green light. Thank you, whoever just became the pilot. So we specialize in public facilities, local government facilities, and I lead our quality of life practice. So we focus on the recreation centers, senior centers, things of that nature. Next slide. So I'm going to show you next is, yeah. Well, no, I didn't advance. Maybe this just needs a battery. I keep wanting to touch the screen, but it's not a touch screen. Well, whenever we figured that out, I'll tell you, we did a series of public meetings. I recognize Ellen. I don't know if any of you were at the public meetings, the evening meetings, but we had 2 focus group meetings and an evening open house meeting. And so I'm gonna walk through as quickly as I can, but tell me if you need me to stop. Hey, it's working now. So to explain the nature of those meetings and kind of the feedback we were asking for and getting out of those meetings, and then we'll go through that feedback in terms of our takeaways. So these next several slides are from those public engagement exercises. This was the agenda for those meetings. We explained a little bit about the site. I assume you guys are already familiar with the site. If not, you'll learn a little bit about it tonight. And we talked about the difference between sort of traditional senior programming and kind of where senior programming is going. And then we did some exercises to try to listen to what folks thought was important in terms of the programming for a building. So quickly looking at the site, if you're not familiar with it, it's situated kind of on a hill, which gives it some nice vistas, but it also poses some visibility challenges. It is the building on the orange roof there. You can see kind of the middle of that screen. It's on a pad site. There's another pad site that it shares a parking lot with. It is unbuilt. So there's an image of the building itself. It was built as a medical office building, but most of it is raw and unfinished on the inside. The second building to the plan north in that view is ready for construction, but is currently unbuilt. And the available portion to us to use as a senior center is in that southern building, and it represents most of that building. You can see the blue bar on that screen, and there's a blow up of that to show that a portion of that is occupied. The bulk of the building that's remaining is about 10,000 square feet. So that tells us what we have to work with in terms of square footage, and hence the prioritization exercises. We all have dreams about what this facility could be, but we're constrained to 10,000 square feet. You can see the images on the right that it is a very raw space. So that is an advantage. We don't have to worry about any demolition. It's ready to become whatever we all determine that it should become. A few slides about senior centers and facilities. I mentioned the term programming before. So in the architectural world and the Parks and Rec world, the word program means different things, right? So in the Parks and Rec world, when we're talking about programming, we're talking about activities. What kinds of offerings of service offerings can we offer the facility? In the architectural realm, art programming is a list of spaces and the nature of those spaces, a space program. So you'll hear me kind of back and forth between architectural programming and facility programming. Kind of doing those exercises together. So these programs are what I'm talking about in terms of what kinds of offerings are typical. So in a traditional senior center, it generally has to do more with sort of the social service aspect of facility offerings. Meal programs are popular, case assistance, education, table games, socialization, those kinds of things. Historically, it's been kind of dominated by more female clientele than male clientele. One thing we often hear in public engagement meetings is, how do we get more guys to come? So that's always a fun conversation to try to get ideas about that. We did have guys come to the meeting, so that was good to hear. And we got to say, what would you like to see in a facility? So that was informative. But really, those three pillars are kind of the traditional pillars of senior programming. So spaces that provide interaction, provide health and wellness, and again, the meal programs are always very popular. Some more examples of the kinds of activities we're talking about in terms of classes, arts and crafts, quilting, game rooms. Traditionally, the guy's space is the billiard room, so that's kind of a question, is that appropriate here or not? But over time, especially when boomers became seniors, boomers are jokingly kind of referred to as a generation that refuses to grow old, and they sort of started changing the nature of a lot of senior facility offerings. We joke that if you can figure out how to name a senior facility without the word senior in it, that in itself would help get people there, because there's sort of that institutional stigma sometimes to senior center that's people say, I'm not going to go there because I'm not old. And I joke about that too, is like, if you could ever figure out how to name that facility, that would be as much about it as anything in terms of marketing. And when I started doing this, I was a bit younger than I am now. And now that I could be a member in most of these facilities, I can identify with that aspect. My favorite term in one of the meetings I got was a guy referred to him and his clan as seenagers. So he said it, not me, so I've adopted it. I thought that was a great attitude about being more active. So the Active Adult Center, you probably have heard that term a lot in the private sector. What happens in the private sector ultimately finds its way into the public sector and the recreation world. So we're seeing a lot more active stuff in what was traditionally more of a sedentary building in a lot of places. And here's some examples of buildings that are less institutional feeling, places that maybe are more attractive for someone to go that doesn't necessarily feel like a quote-unquote senior center. Just more examples of those kinds of spaces. And these images are important because that'll come up later in our conversation about the public engagement meeting that happened in the evening. So what we did in the morning exercises was a programming exercise with 2 focus groups. So the first focus group in the morning had a group of stakeholders. The second one in the afternoon was the CAS group. And we gave them the similar exercise so we could kind of get a couple different data sets. And so what we did is we challenged them to prioritize what are the most important programs in each person's view. And we did it with a spreadsheet. We kind of did it a bit under a guise of planning the building in terms of spaces, but the real goal was to force that prioritization and also put out there into the public realm the fact that we have a 10,000 square foot building. That doesn't mean you have 10,000 square feet of functional area. So just for the sake of this exercise, what we use in our industry is the term circulation factor. So that's the square footage that goes to things that aren't functional spaces. That's wall thicknesses, stairs, corridors, mechanical spaces, stuff like that. So at the end of the day, you have maybe plus or minus, to be determined, maybe about 7,500 square feet of space that is actually the programmable, usable space for programs. So we use that as a prioritization tool to say, hey, you got a budget of 7,500 square feet. Here's a bunch of spaces and how much space they potentially take up. And we asked them to organize that to give us, they had to choose which ones were in and which ones were out. So we got those tabulations, and it's a fun exercise because most everybody was trying to say, well, what if I made this room a little bigger or that room a little smaller? Yes?
I'm sorry, has the fact that it will be a senior center been like definitively decided? I remember seeing a survey that said that it was between 3 different options, but I don't remember it being said like, that's what this will be.
It's a senior activity center.
Okay,
Yeah.
when did we choose that?
The public input process chose that for
Okay,
us.
so the survey, that was the result that
Yes.
had the most, okay, got it, perfect, thank you.
Well, thanks, that one was way over my head. So, like I said, the goal was to put that out there that we don't have 10,000 square feet of usable space. How would you prioritize it? So some people made a lot of notes and it was great. Some people really got into the weeds and wanted to edit the square footages for us and that kind of thing. So I hope they had fun with that. But at the end of the day, that we weren't trying to design it yet. We're trying to get feedback of, well, would you put this in it or that in it? So the morning focus group, we had 8 folks there. And then the afternoon focus group with CAS, we had 33. It was a much larger group. So I'm not going to bore you with trying to show you all of the worksheets. But what we did was put that into an Excel sheet and tried to sort it and figure out, okay, what did we hear? And here's a summary of the 2 tabulations from the morning group on the left and the afternoon group on the right, and which priorities kind of rose to the top. Now, it's not often that 2 groups would have a breakout that was so similar in terms of 4 that were kind of clearly in the green, that were what we heard the most, and then another group of 4 in the middle, and then a group of red toward bringing up the rear. But that's just the way it happened to work out. So we tabulated the numbers, and those were the logical sort of break points between where we had a bigger number and a smaller number having a bit of a jump. So what we heard wasn't entirely unexpected. There was a lot of preference for large multi-purpose rooms and classrooms. That would be what we expect to hear. One thing that was a specific question that we wanted to ask was about the nature of the difference between a commercial kitchen and a catering kitchen, because they're very different functions and they have different price points and space needs. And the thing that we heard from both was a desire for a larger commercial kitchen, maybe even one that could have some programming capability aspect to it. So that's what we heard there. And then I'll talk about the evening. So the evening one was come and go. So we couldn't use the same exercise because we couldn't present to that group on a come and go setting. So what we did for that group, you may have been involved in the dotocracy kind of exercises in the past, where people were given dots as they came in and stickers to put on poster boards about the kinds of spaces that they would prioritize. So we gave everybody, like, I think it was 5 or 6 dots. Colors don't matter. It was just the dots we had. And so we used that to tabulate, okay, what are we hearing from another, group of folks? So here's the 3 data sets together with called the dotocracy from the evening on the right. And so that had a similar, I would say, priorities in terms of multipurpose rooms and classrooms and a commercial kitchen. But we heard a little bit more, I would say, from the more active senior in that space. You can see fitness actually made it into the green space on that one. Arts and crafts made it in the green space in group 2. Group 1 was more focused on social. The ones that we heard the least about, ceramics, and group fitness was kind of in the middle. So what that led us to do was just concept a couple of ideas. And this is where I have my caveat again about saying your next slide is going to look like a floor plan. It is a floor plan, but we're not designing yet. So what we're trying to convey with these concepts is to give everybody a sense of space, like how many things really do fit in that 10,000 square feet. And because we're designers, we can't just put in blocks. We have to actually tinker with it and try to make it look somewhat real. So the first one will show you what we kind of termed it our chassis or our base plan. So these are the things that we heard on all the groups as sort of a premise. Multi-purpose space that's divisible, a lobby lounge space, some necessaries that are going to happen in any plan, like your administrative space, your restrooms. We heard a lot about storage. I could say we could dedicate all 10,000 square feet to storage and it would still be filled up. You fill what you have, but we wanted to block out a decent chunk for storage. We have a larger kitchen and pantry in there because of what we heard about that. And we have that white space on the bottom really to kind of seed the conversation that we're hoping to hear from you guys. What you think about tonight is we think you really need these elements as a premise. So what else can we do in that available space based on what we heard from the public and what we hear from you? That's what that white space is a placeholder. So the first concept, I would say, is one that's more about programming, and for the sake of conversation, we threw in a classroom, a game room. So 2 more classrooms and a game room. I would call this maybe this one is more focused toward that traditional senior center in terms of the program offerings that it's providing. The next one, we're calling it the fitness option, which is maybe geared a little bit more toward that active adult. So it still has that same chassis, but the programs that are additional in purple or below are a group exercise room that could actually be multi-purpose depending on how we set that up. And then the fitness space on the left is that individualized fitness. So that means that's where there would be like treadmills and ellipticals and things like that. And then lastly, we try there's always we kind of like this about it, we kind of like that about it. Well, what is it if it's either, or a little bit of both? So this one tried to say, what if it's a little bit of both? So instead of having the group X room being more dedicated to fitness, we made it a divisible classroom. So it would have a different kind of a finish out. You could still do fitness in it, but it wouldn't necessarily have a sprung fitness floor. So it's still a very flexible space. You really think of it as another multi-purpose room that's divisible by 2 instead of 3. And then that room on the left could either be a game room or arts and crafts. We talked about those spaces that are accommodating something that's less flexible. So purpose-built space, like for an arts and crafts room, you need a sink, you need more storage, you need something moppable, those kinds of things. A game room, once you put a pool table in a room, it becomes that, right? Because you can't move a pool table in and out like you can some other things. So what we're really saying is that space could be that one of those sort of dedicated program spaces as opposed to a flexible program space like we have in the classroom and the multi-purpose room. So here's all three together, just for that conversation, to hear what you guys think would best serve your community. And the answer is probably none of them. It's probably everyone is going to have an opinion about how they would tweak it. But again, it's less about layout as it is about what does this 10,000 feet house. And then lastly, since we did this initial PowerPoint, we got some feedback, and I'm going to pass the baton to Ellen if she will be so kind as to allow us. We got some feedback from, I don't know who I say it's from, just you or your group or whatever, but I was going to ask you to talk about this slide.
Sure. We basically looked at where the kitchen was proposed to be, and it would be adjacent to the doctor's office, and which would mean like the supplies and stuff would be loaded in on that end, which is also the front of the building, and we wanted it to be on the side of the building so it's less in the traffic zone, and then the people in the doctor's office don't have to smell food and stuff. We were talking about, I wonder where the dumpsters will go. You don't want to see those dumpsters, but you got to have them. So basically, we took your plan and kind of flip-flopped it both horizontally and vertically and came up with this plan. We also made the lobby smaller. We figured we need a lobby, but we don't really need a lounge because we have those big hallways, and we'll just put little seating areas along the walls.
So most of those comments, I would say, have to do with planning and design, which we'll get into when we get to that stage. What I took away when I first saw it was I saw a preference from this image for more multifunction in arts and crafts, more towards the traditional side, as opposed to the fitness option. That was the takeaway that I got from this slide. So we'll figure out how to lay it out after we get those program sets established. Yes, sir.
Was a movie room ever discussed?
It was one of the slides, one of the images on the boards, I believe, but not a dedicated space. That didn't come up high on the list. Not that you couldn't show a movie in that larger room potentially, but it wouldn't be set up like a theater. Any other questions or preferences of?
Also, just to clarify, one other thing about the input process, we didn't have an online survey for this building. We're trying to expedite this entire process, but we went to our PROS master plan. We looked at the raw data. We filtered by the senior demographic, and we found that the data from the PROS master plan survey coincided with what the request we got from the public input process for
Public input did you have? What was the total count
from the PROS master plan.
from the people that did it?
Do we have the exact count, Stephen, of from this
From
the
this
PROS master
process?
plan? It was well over 1,000 pieces of input we had. I don't know by that demographic filter what the quantity was, but we had a focus group. Do we know the
We do
size
have
of
that on here, so there
Okay.
were, we calculated about 23 people just by counting the dots. I mean, other people might have come that didn't place dots on boards, but that's how many people engaged with the boards in the evening. The first focus group was 8. I think the second focus group was 33. We received 33 worksheets. I'm not sure how many of the people from the focus groups might have come to the evening, so there's probably at least a few that are the same influencers, if you will. But that was the scope of that day. But yes, we've been charged with moving very quickly, so I guess that's another reason that we kind of jumped into planning a little bit to try to get a bit of a head start. Council has tasked us with presenting to them basically a month from today, next month, based on what we've heard and what we hear from you guys. So because they want to want to build this thing as soon as possible. So,
And so next steps, we'll take input from this body tonight. Then we're going to have a follow-up meeting with Cass to go over some of the, little bit more details about the programming space based upon the concept plan that they had turned in that you saw on the final slide. And then we have a council meeting scheduled for March 18th. And we're going to consolidate all of the input, all of the concepts, and refine it a bit more, maybe throw some high-level budget numbers to it and present it for their consideration.
Sure.
Yeah, one additional thing that we also did is CAS conducted a feasibility study in 2021. And so that was something that factored into this plan as well. We identified the programming elements, and so that's on top of the PROS master plan, the feasibility study, the focus groups, and as well as the evening meeting. We identified all those different points of information for us to come up with the programming for those 3 or 4 options that you saw tonight. So just wanted to clarify that as well.
Personally, I think that we need to have the area as flexible as possible, because in 10 years, I'm going to be going there, and, I might not want to do the same stuff that we're doing now, or, we're just a different generation. We may be looking for something different. Are the movable walls really expensive? Are we choosing to put up walls that we can't move for a reason?
It really has just more to do with the functionality than the cost.
Okay, okay.
I would say movable walls make a lot of sense when you need a lot of flexibility. Like you can see, especially in the flex option, we basically added another movable wall, if you will, versus the traditional option. The challenge is if you prioritize rooms like a game room or an arts and crafts room that really is a purpose-built space, it doesn't really make sense to have a movable partition against that room. You need that to be separated from the others. But
So are we building things like in the arts and craft room? Are we building a wall of, I don't know, storage, or are we just calling a room arts and craft room, and we can call it whatever we want?
Typically, that's an example of a purpose-built room. So like I said, it would have a sink, it might have a plaster trap in it, it would need a lot more storage, because usually when you're doing projects, they last for more than one class.
Sure.
So you need a place to put that. Okay. So, yes, right now, it's a placeholder square footage until we're not gonna design it 3 times. We're gonna concept it 3 times and then we get into all those details. Like a billiard room or a game room, you start talking about what kinds of games. I mentioned billiard tables a lot, but that could be as simple as table games, which it would be more flexible if it was really just relegated to board games and card games and things like that. But usually when we see a quote-unquote game room, we're seeing maybe a pool table, maybe a shuffleboard table, something that's not movable. It becomes a dedicated space. There's nothing to say you couldn't hold games in those other multi-purpose rooms on whatever Tuesday night it's game night, and whatever night it's a different yoga night, or that could, to your point, flexible spaces make sense as a prioritization, and that's what we heard quite a bit.
And my only other comment is, when I look at these, it looks like I'm looking at hall. It feels like an institution, just from these diagrams, and maybe I'm not seeing something, but I don't know if there's a.
Sketch looks, I don't know if it's your sketch, but the sketch that was on here that was this one, yes, feels less like that,
Yeah.
a lot less like that.
Because
it has that big
Yeah.
open space in the middle.
Well, those big open spaces are missing some columns that we really can't do a whole lot about. So there's design. Design will happen, again, later. I don't want to get too hung up on layout, because layout has a lot more influences. The most primary influence is program. And then we'll figure out the layouts.
Can I ask a question? Oh, it's outside of this per se. Two things. Are we gonna have a shuttle? If we're having a senior center like this, will we have a shuttle to get folks to the senior center?
Yeah, so once we start talking about the various programming elements, those are going to be things that will be factored into consideration, such as transportation, or maybe the types of programs such as like Meals on Wheels, or maybe we've identified partners that can help us with some of those. But as of right now, this exercise is truly trying to identify the programming elements and us getting into the construction standpoint. But as we get further along, those could be definitely conversations that we can have and bring back to this body.
Do we think that could be a potential problem, that we build a thing that people can't access if we don't have that planned now?
Yeah, as far as transportation, I know there's various programs that the city is currently working on, not only improving the transportation plan itself. So that's a comprehensive plan that the city is looking to explore here very shortly. Can't necessarily answer the question whether it'll be a problem. I mean, I can tell you that there are, I don't want to call them concerns, but well, in a way it is a concern. The entryway into it, I'll show you guys, which Stephen spoke about at the very beginning. So the entry, as you see into the property itself, Daisy Lane, it is at a hill. And so it's one of those aspects that the visibility, that's something that we're going to be exploring, but also going to be working with our transportation partners just to make sure that it's safe for the residents and really for the members that go to that facility. So that is something that has been identified on our end, but outside of issues, so to say, getting to and from the facility, those aren't necessarily something that we foresee.
Okay. And then second question, or I guess comment, is I think if you don't pigeonhole yourself into rooms being dedicated to a thing, it gives more opportunity and more inclusivity to the folks going to the senior center. Because I don't really, I mean, I know billiard rooms are being used maybe, but is that handicap accessible? Same for shuffleboard. Like, I think we don't want to create something inclusive and then make it not inclusive by dedicating rooms to things that only certain people can use.
Yep, absolutely. And then there's also, I mean, one thing that we haven't even talked about is the furnishings aspect, right? So you're talking about tables and making sure from a ADA accessibility standpoint, those are things that are kind of givens in a way from the building standpoint that Stephen could probably speak about and he could probably spend a whole hour probably talking about all those various regulations and rules that architects have to follow. But those will be coming into consideration whenever we're talking about the amenities and really the furnishings, I should say, that'll be featured internally. But as far as the programming aspect, I know there was talks about the openness. One thing that I'd like to point out, like the fitness room that you see here, it doesn't necessarily have walls. What it does give you that invitation where you're just looking at it from a glance. It maybe makes the space a little bit bigger. So there are avenues that we can maybe open up some walls, so to say, and still incorporate those dividers. So there could always be opportunities for us to have, I mean, we're standing in a room right now that has a divider behind us that you could literally open up and then you enter into another room. So there are avenues that we do want to make sure that it's flexible. Now, there was a comment made, is it strictly for seniors? Even though the programming is going to be focused for seniors, there are opportunities for rentals, of course. So if we want to offer more bigger events, so to say, we can go ahead and open up those dividers where you have more of this more room in order for us to accommodate such events. So that's something that we're looking as well from the flexibility standpoint. That was part of the feedback. We want to make sure that it's as flexible as possible.
And Kaz is in agreement with, if programming is not 365, 24/7. So just like today, we work together with a calendar, and if there's unused time for certain rooms, then that would show on the calendar, and those types might be available for like a meeting space rental, which we know we have a shortage of in the city of Kyle as well. So to Chris's point, we heard that the resounding demand for flexible spaces, and every time you see one of those perforated lines, that's what that's indicating. There's a track and movable wall.
I was also going to say, on the storage question, which always comes up. If you see those little boxes like on the each end of each room, that's storage, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, placeholders for, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's intended to show placeholders for cabinets or some kind of storage, counters, uppers and lowers. All that would be laid out once the room is laid out. You can see the dots in those corridors are columns. So we were trying to lay out rooms based on respecting some column grids. And so that was also an influence. We were, again, I don't want this to be too much about planning and where things go, because that will come next. But there are some realities that we went ahead and respected, like those columns, like the riser room on the bottom left is a given. It's already there, so that can't move. The corridors that you see flanking either side, we can't have it's a building code issue. You can't have a dead-end corridor. So we have to make sure exiting works. So we're already thinking about those things, but that's not necessarily the task at hand. We're just trying to think ahead so that we can be nimble, knowing we have just a few weeks to put something in front of council.
So what are you asking us for?
To vote on one of these?
If you have a preference for one of these, like I said, the takeaway I have from this one is a preference for, I would say, the flex option. That's essentially the flex option rearranged.
And what you guys are giving already, the feedback about each of the concepts. This is what we like about this one. We want to make sure that this is baked into the design. We want flexibility. So any type of input like that, we're going to see if that hasn't already been factored into design. We're going to make sure we incorporate that and
And you don't
work
have
with
to
Kaz.
say
And
you
then,
like this option or that option. You can say what you like about this option or don't like about that option.
correct.
That's equally helpful to us.
I like the flexible option.
Yeah.
I think the flex option is the best one. I wonder if that, it has a solid wall on both sides. If you put storage, sink, stuff just on one of those walls, why can't the other one open? Because if you wanna have game night, okay, great, but what if you can't fit everyone in that room? Open that wall and then you've got that whole big room to have game night with every senior in the whole community. You can make one
Saying-
standing permanent wall that has all the storage, but then make the other side flexible too.
So basically what you're suggesting is the multi-purpose just mirrors on the other side of the central corridor. So you have two similar rooms, just two big flexible rooms.
Also, looking at the outside of the building, I think perhaps I know why you put the entrance on that corner. Is that the building, that one is taller, right, than the other?
Yeah, so what you see
What do you call them, the dormers or
on the
the?
right-hand side of that image, that's that, you're right. We kind of envision that corner looking like intuitively is the front door to someone who comes to the facility. That's also where the handicap parking is, right by that door. We do have
That
some
makes sense.
constraints, for sure. There's a lot of existing windows and doors that we were hoping this layout could respect, and take advantage of daylight in appropriate rooms, and where there's less windows, put the dark things like the storage and that kind of stuff. So there is more going on in the background that I don't want to, again, dive into a lot, but you're right. We were trying to think ahead as much as we could just because of the pace.
Move on to the next agenda item.
So if there's no additional feedback,
Do we need to make a motion of what one we pick?
no, there's no action
No,
associated with
that's
this.
fine.
We'll take your feedback and incorporate that. We meet with Kaz next, just as a reminder. Flow may change. We're going to take all of these things into consideration and build a senior facility for everybody.
And I think they'll go to city council with the final plans mid-March.
At least the concept and feedback, yeah, it'll be March 18th.
Great, thank you very much.
Next, we're going to receive a report, hold a discussion, and provide staff feedback regarding the Parks and Recreation and Open Space Master Plan.
Awesome. while we wait for the item to go on screen, I'd like to introduce this item, Chris Escoto, Parks Deputy Director. It's an exciting time for City of Kyle. The Parks Department over the last several months, as you all know, has been undergoing through a Parks and Recreation, or what we call the Parks and Recreation and Open Space Master Plan, or the PROS Plan. So we've had a lot of input that you're going to see today, and I know we've been providing monthly updates on where we've been on this project itself. But this is going to set the foundation truly for the next 10 years. So this is going to be a set of plan that's going to give us the CIP projects, identify the needs, identify the gaps that exist. So you're going to see a lot of information, a lot of great information. And similar to this last item, we're just trying to get some general feedback on thoughts and truly lay out the foundation on the next set of plans on how we're going to be targeting individual plans or maybe some recommendations that you'll be seeing. So I'd like to introduce the Stantec team. They've done a phenomenal job over the last several months. And I have Paula Fernandez that will be joining us today. So I am going to let her take the podium.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. Hi, all. Thank you for having me here tonight. As Chris mentioned, I'm here to show a little bit of an update of where we are. I remember being here a few months ago and showing you an initial stage of our existing conditions analysis and a view of what this process was going to look like. We're in a really exciting part of the process where we are in the crafting of recommendations and ideas that were based on what we heard from all of y'all and community members and from the data that we collected. So I'm gonna get to show you some exciting sneak peeks of some of those ideas. They're still in draft mode because we're still in the, they won't be final until we deliver to the Parks Department and to Council, which means that we will go into our next phase, which will be the second round of feedback. We like to have multiple rounds of feedback because we based our projects and our plans on feedback loops. I don't want to just come get your feedback and then you don't hear from me until it's going to adoption. So we'll have another round of feedback with public engagement, pop-ups, just as you saw us a few months ago here. So this first section, I'm going to speed through it because I showed a little bit and I want to kind of show that where we are now, which is the exciting part of the recommendations. But last time I was here, I mentioned that we do a data-driven and a community-driven approach to our parks master plans. So our data-driven approach was based on a five-pronged needs assessment. So we did a resource-based assessment where we look at your existing resources, landmarks, in this case, rivers, creeks, drainage, I-35. We looked at your access space, which means the 10-minute walk or access to park or facility, pedestrian connectivity. We looked at your equity-based assessment, which is environmental, socioeconomic, and health vulnerabilities. I remember showing some maps of that last time I was here. And then we do a standard-based assessment, which is our benchmark. We put Kyle and then we compare it to peer cities, but then we also measure Kyle to other NRPA standards. So where should you be based on your population projection, and where do you meet and measure on facilities, programming, budgeting, funding. And then the last one, which is a constant one throughout this process, which is a demand which is our community engagement. So in this first phase, we had the survey, we had public workshops, we had 2 public workshops, we had about 8 pop-ups, we had focus group meetings where I remember seeing a couple of you on the trails and the conservation workshop. I remember seeing some of you on the public workshops and pop-ups, so thank you for your participation. And then we also, so all of that kind of came to an end a few months ago. So I'm just gonna skim through these because I might just be saying things that you already know. So we did assess your existing parks classification. Part of the recommendation is going to recommend an updated parks classification. So this is your existing one, which means we looked at your parks, where you are, your access. We looked at your facilities inventory. We found that 2 meet and surpass the NRPA standards, 2, which are the running tracks and disc golfs, are right below where you should be. So, but what that tells me is that the rest, we're not meeting the NRPA standards. So Just keep this in mind because this will come back when we get to the site plans and renderings. We looked at your parkland analysis. It looks like we're at a deficit there of 6.5 per 1,000 residents. We looked at your budgeting and operations. There's a negative $4 million. We looked at your staffing. This number updated since last I was here. Our Parks Department has been updating and adding new members to their staff. So there was a bigger gap since a few months from I was here. So we see progress even in the last item that was presented. That's something that we heard in the engagement. So we see a lot of great movement happening for Kyle. We looked at, like I mentioned, we compared Kyle to peer cities. The peer cities that we use are the peer cities that the city as a whole uses. So some of them are similar to size and population. Some of them are similar in location. And some of are compared to where the projection of population for Kyle is going to be in the future. So kind of measuring to where we are now, where we are going to be, and then to our partners and sisters around us. We did a spatial level of service. So we basically look at all of your parks based on the size. We have a radius of how the reach for each of those. We see a lot of coverage on the east side of I-35, less of a coverage on the west side. We did an environmental vulnerability index showing a high vulnerability near I-35, makes sense, right? But then some along the west and a little bit on the east side. We did a socioeconomic vulnerability, so this one we saw the highest socioeconomic vulnerability on the east side. And we did health, which only showed a little bit on the northeast, high vulnerability. Park access, we saw high vulnerability in the north and the south, and a little bit on the medium side on that middle part of Kyle, both east and west. Like I said, we did a resource-based assessment, looking at your assets. And then the demand-based, which is the community engagement. So we look at engagement and information at a multi-lens, right? We don't just base that on a survey. Every sticky dot, every comment that we hear is a data point. It's feedback that we take into consideration. So some numbers here, we got over 1,000 surveys. We talked, engaged, and received over 4,000 feedback points. We have, like I mentioned, a lot of engagement meetings and methods. When we ask how do residents of Kyle envision the future of Kyle, these are some of the words that we heard. Inclusive, educational, peaceful, calm, trails, shade, fun, memorable. When we asked them what types of facilities and amenities are the most needed, the top responses were trails, playgrounds, sports courts, soccer fields, aquatics. We'd also heard indoor recreation center. We heard lots of water recreation, whether if it's pools, splash pads. When we also asked what type of indoor facilities or indoor activities would you like to see at a facility. The top 5 responses were indoor sports, fitness and wellness, youth programming, aquatics programming, and arts and crafts. Of all of the feedback that we heard, over 76% of those 4,000 data points mentioned in their top priorities a need for indoor recreation. And that can mean a senior center, that can mean a youth center, multi-generation, just in general, a need and a want for an indoor recreation. We hosted a trails workshop where we showed different quadrants of Kyle and then started to envision potential connectivity, hearing what are the challenges of existing trails. We talked about the possibilities. Just another good data point, 80% of residents of Kyle that throughout the survey and other engagement methods mentioned that they would place priority on trails for Kyle. So overall, I think it's one more slide. We also asked a question about budget, right? We do see a lot of momentum and a lot of things happening in Kyle, but when we narrowed it down and said, okay, if we need to talk about trade-offs, what are the things that are most important to you, right? So the number one was upgrading existing facilities and equipments over new facilities, developing trails, number two, and number three, improving maintenance and operations. This was just a kind of question about looking at existing facilities and what are the appearances and maintenance. So kind of wanted to show a little bit of a scale. So we had overall satisfaction, but could improve were pools, restrooms, pavilions, water amenities, so a lot of outdoor spaces. So summary of what we heard. In general, people want more recreation facilities, whether if it's fields, courts, trails, indoor spaces. We want more access to spaces all around Kyle. An aquatic center or pools, indoor recreation center, as I mentioned, trails, preservation and open space areas, opportunities for public and interactive art, splash pads, and amphitheaters. So a lot of diversity, but definitely the main three things that we heard throughout was indoor recreation, trails, and pools, aquatic center. On the where? Oh, next slide, please. So when we put all of that information, all of the community engagement, when we put all of that data, this is what it looks like. This is what we call our priority map. So this is where we identified priorities areas. It doesn't mean that other areas here noted, let's say in yellow, don't have priority. It's just based on the research standard, demand, and access and community engagement. This is where the concentration of need was. So we see a little bit on the north. We see some of it on the south and some of it on the east side. Something to note is that, and we don't look at this map as the ultimate guide, right? We look at it, everything comprehensively, because one of the things that we mentioned is in the spatial level of service and the accessibility, we see a lot of Kyle's parks on the east side, but something to note is that a lot of those parks are undeveloped. So it's showing that there's park access, but the options for those are limited compared to others. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, perfect. So, okay. So now that we have all of this information, we start putting together the Parks and Recreation Open Space Master Plan. So we frame it in creating a vision and mission for the Parks Department. We identify goals that are basically distilling all of that information into five goals. And then we take those goals and then create recommendations and strategies and action plans that the Parks Department will start to implement in the next 10 years to achieve those goals and those visions. And to achieve those recommendations, we also provide an implementation matrix, which will show who's the responsible party, what is the timeline, what are the funding opportunities, what is the cost, and what is it going to take to achieve those strategies. So, the vision that was identified is to envision a thriving network of parks and recreation where nature, inclusion, and community come together to enhance quality of life in Kyle. The mission statement, to be a premier and sustainable parks and recreation system that builds community and promotes health, conservation, and inclusivity for all. So the next few slides, you're gonna start seeing how all of that feedback and information is going to start visualizing into an actual plan. So we identified 5 main goals or 5 main pillars into this Parks Master Plan. The first one is dynamic and inclusive community. This one touches programming, touches quality of facilities. It talks about design, its accessibility, mental health. Balanced and connected system is how can we reach or how can we access facilities. So this one will talk about trails. This one will talk about park plan typologies. This will talk about some ideas for master plans for some of the existing parks. Flourishing nature experience is more about conservation, preservation, and management of our nature spaces. Vibrant and prosperous destination. This one covers the economic development part of it, a lot of the marketing part of it, and just how to make sure that our parks are being used by our residents, but also how do we make sure that there's some component of generating income, or generating from the parks. And then the last one is sustainable resource. This is where we when we talk about operations, management, organizational structure for the Parks Department, and for how do we address our facilities. So I'm going to share a little bit of a snap view of what these goals, how these goals turn into actions. So like I mentioned, dynamic and inclusive community talks about play, recreation, how to promote mental and physical health, how do we create high quality and welcoming spaces, how do we support emotional and social well-being. Balance and connected network is how do we access spaces and how do we get to them. So this is where we're going to talk about trails, a trails master plan, a balanced distribution of parks. So how do we make sure that we go back to that priority map and look, okay, if we're going to place effort into improving or adding into our park system, where is that need that we should focus on to create a balance of access? How do we access enhance mobility? How do we get to facilities safer? And then social connectivity and community engagement. So we want to kind of capitalize on the momentum of the participation of community engagement and create touch points where the Parks Department continues to engage residents and citizens of Kyle to continue on learning, because this plan is being crafted now for 10 years, right? But we want to still continue on listening. So I'm going to show a couple of site plans and renders. Our scope included to provide site plans and renders for 6 parks. The first one that I'm going to show, these are all in draft mode because we're going to continue on listen and make sure that we got your feedback right. So these will show a reflection of what is possible in this site based on what is around, based on floodplains, but also based on the feedback. So for example, if in the engagement we would have heard, we want, table tennis to be all around Kyle. So then we would have reflected in, you'll see that reflected here. So this Kyle, Lake Kyle and also Oro, which is this little square part on the east side of the site, shows a couple of sports courts. It shows pavilions, playgrounds. It has a nature center, educational boardwalk, and then fishing opportunities. So these master plans are just ideas of what these parks could be. These are not ready to be built. It's just what we heard and how we can envision these parks to be in the future. So this is a view of this boardwalk here, looking into the lake and into that nature center in the back. Opportunities for education in nature, which is something else that we heard in the engagement. A fishing deck so that we can create better opportunities for fishing. This is Seton Park and Trail. So this one has more of a trail, a nature trail component. So you can see this one connects to the Vibe Trail. It has a sports court field on the south part. So you can see a view here of that Seton Park and Trail. So kind of imagining what it could look like. Some fitness equipment. That's something else that we heard, to have fitness equipment throughout trails and parks. Another view of that nature trail. So going back to the conserve and preserve, but still allowing some recreation. Plum Creek Preserve, this one, same as the other one, shows a lot more of nature component. So this one it also connects to the trail, the Vibe Trail. It has a playground, but it's mostly preserving and just adding soft trails to the Plum Creek Preserve. So a little bit of a view of what that could look like. This one is Four Seasons Farm. This one is a smaller park. This one we made sure to centralize a playground and splash pad to this park. So a little bit of an idea of what that could look like. We also heard a lot of shade, so we added shade to this visualization of this park. Heard a lot about water. It gets really hot, so we need shade and water. Kyle Vista Park. This one was not necessarily in our scope, but when we were touring Kyle, we saw the potential of Kyle Vista, not only because of the size, but because of the connectivity. So we took it upon us to design what it could look like. So this one, you can see a lot more space and a lot more usability. So this one we see a lot more concentration of sports and more play rather than the other ones that show a lot more nature. This one also shows that there's space here for outdoor event space. That's something else that we heard in the engagement. So maybe a potential stage or amphitheater that people can enjoy music or some shows. Post Oak, it's a smaller site, but maybe a possibility to put some multi-use fields. And then lastly, Bunton Creek Village. This one has some connectivity to residential neighborhoods, so trying to connect to these streets in the neighborhood through trails, and then adding a couple of sports fields along the developable area. Third goal, like I mentioned, preserving, managing, conserving. So this one talks about like a conservation workshop that we had. This is where all of those ideas would fall under. Vibrant and prosperous, like I mentioned, this is where we would recommend partnerships with economic development or nearby chambers. This is where we would talk about creating marketing and branding strategies for the Parks Department to share with Kyle residents of all of the amazing amenities and facilities that Kyle offers. And the last one, as I mentioned, this is more for the team on operations, maintenance, staffing. Just a couple more slides. So I wanted to show what the implementation would look like. So this is a snapshot. This is just a placeholder, but how do we land all of these great ideas, all of these visuals into actions? So we'll provide the Parks Department with an implementation matrix that will show all of these recommendations and action steps. It'll align it to the community engagement themes. So we'll continue on connecting to what we heard. It'll identify responsible parties, probable cost, and timelines. Additionally, our team, our North America funding team, will provide funding opportunities for the City of Kyle. So beyond just like obvious funding opportunities, our team will sit with the city, with the Parks Department and identify how do we make sure that there's funding opportunities for all of these great ideas. Okay. I know that was a lot, but I wanted to show you where we are. We're in the really exciting part. Our next steps is to go back to the community and show what we put together based on the feedback, and get more feedback before we start drafting the final version. That's why there is a lot of drafts in red, because we want to make sure that we got your vision right, and that we can put together a plan that is not only illustrative of the vision, but it's also implementable for the Parks Department. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm on the east side, and infrastructure is
not great, and seeing more stuff being built there, but the roads remaining the same seems problematic. Like, I think on the one, it said Lake Kyle and or so, but then the lake said Lake Lineberger.
Yes,
Is
that,
that a typo?
yeah, that was Linebarger Lake, correct, sorry. Lake Kyle, it's close to Lake Kyle, but it's right behind Tobias Elementary, but internally we call it Linebarger Lake.
But it's Lake Kyle.
That was just,
Two separate.
that was just a
But
typo.
it's all in that general area.
Yes.
Right, which is, to me, problematic that we're building all this stuff. Like, I'm in Button, I'm off Button Creek Reserve, so by Button Creek Village, that's, I don't wanna say nightmare, but kind of, to get in and out. And again, we're building stuff and people are gonna get upset that the traffic is a nightmare, yeah. So are we taking that in consideration when we're building all this stuff? Because it'd be great to have these things to go to if you can go. And just for me, it'd probably take me 10 minutes to get there, even though I live half a mile away, right? And then secondly, we're saying indoor recreation, right? This isn't gonna get conflated with sports complex, right? I just wanna make sure that that's clear what our indoor recreation is and is not.
That's the kind of feedback we're looking for through this process. We ran the Sportsplex master plan concurrent with the general park and recreation open space master plan. And we did that because we wanted to know, like, I think we convolute sometimes, like, or confuse, like, the indoor component for like a field house is what it looked like before versus an outdoor sports complex. And the purpose of this process was for us to find out what the citizens of Kyle really wanted. And so do we need outdoor athletic fields? Do we really need them? Well, surveys and input said we need athletic fields. We're in a deficit by national standards and by our own citizen standards and what they're expecting. So we're like, okay, well, where could they go? So that site is one potential site for athletic fields, as were a few other sites around the city, as you all saw. The other part was, do you even want an indoor recreation center or something that looks like that? If you do, what do you want in it? And so we got feedback like, well, we want sports courts and we want fitness facilities, a number of things like that. And so getting that information tells us, well, maybe it's not destination if there's more fitness. I mean, a lot of people don't travel too far, although since Crunch opens, that makes us rethink everything. But there's a high demand for fitness, and it's no surprise after we saw really what happened with Crunch. Also, another it's a typo on Lake Kyle. It should have been Linebarger Lake. I also wanted to mention that the Button Athletic Fields, we don't officially own those. That actually belongs to that HOA, but it's just a space that we had identified and did some, Stantec did a good job just saying, hey, if the city were to ever require this is some possible use for it.
And then to go back to my point about the infrastructure, when we do the park planning, are we comparing it to the road master plan? Like, hey, we're building this, 10 years we're gonna have these roads. Because I know that
Right.
particular area, we have a lot of roads that are gonna be built in the next.
Right now, they're not speaking to each other. We just started a transportation master plan process,
Okay.
and we are very early at this. This is conceptual master planning of what could be based upon all the feedback we received. So get all the feedback, and it's like, now what? What could we do with it? And so Stantec looked at these undeveloped parkland that we have in our system and said, well, here's how we could potentially meet some of those needs. We haven't even got into how we would fund those. I mean, all of these master plans, they're not in the CIP right now. And so if we want to get serious about it, once we talk to council may say, hey, we need to look at prioritizing some of these. If we need to prioritize, let's see what the master plan prioritized. And then we can talk about the funding that it would take to do something like that. And when you start getting to that level, then you got to look at those questions. What about infrastructure? What about parking? I mean, those are big things that need to be considered first.
But wouldn't you do that upfront instead of put all this time and money into planning, but then not have roads to get there?
It's a lot easier to master plan parks and based on need versus waiting on a transportation plan right now. I mean, if otherwise it's just a lot of data that we've collected and we can't do anything meaningful. At least it's not uncommon for plans. You don't sink a whole lot of cost into preliminary master planning, especially when you do it like with an economy of scale through this process. And so they're full design ready. If where it's like, hey, we have some conceptuals. We know what this could be. We see that this could meet a need. If we're like, hey, we really need to start moving on this to meet the Kyle's needs. We're advanced further on our transportation master plan. These things are starting to coincide in light of the recent Hayes County road bond. And then we start letting these work together and overlaying them on each other.
Wallace is say is, I feel like people on that side do want things, because we're kind of just out on a little bit of an island because of the road, and I think,
Yep.
I think folks would like this, but it would just be the communication of, we are taking all of this in consideration to get that buy-in, because my initial thought's like, oh, I'm gonna be stuck in my house, but
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think if we can communicate that it's a thoughtful process of,
And there is lower hanging fruit too. There's some, there's existing parks that still need some upgrades. So it's like, hey, we have parks like Steeplechase Park or Lake Kyle or Waterleaf Park, and they have some space and they have some, we can make some upgrades there and satisfy some of these needs. Just, we can maximize the utilization of some of these areas. Or we can start looking at the Vibe Trail and saying, how do we have alternate modes of transportation where you don't even have to hit the road to get to some of these parks if you live in that area?
Yeah, and I was going to add too. I mean, you're speaking my language whenever you're talking about all this development. I say it's a puzzle. It's a puzzle board, right? So all these puzzle pieces you're trying to fit together. So transportation is the key component of that. As Mr. Lopez was saying, one of the components that we need to look at from a park planning standpoint is how do we set ourselves for, if we don't have the funding, how do we set ourselves for grants? So if we have these shovel-ready plans or these shovel-ready concepts, then we're, in a way, kind of one step ahead of that process when we can deliver probably in time. Fortunately, the grant process takes a lot. So it's not like if I get a grant right now, I can't go in and start construction tomorrow, especially if it's federal grants. That's a whole probably 1 to 2 year process before we get there. So it's essentially just trying to get those puzzle pieces kind of in play for us once we get there. So we do know infrastructure is a concern. That is something that the city is currently addressing. But even within the master plan, Paola's talked about the community wants to see their existing parks developed over new parks. What was presented to you are new parks, but there's also that balance. So it's just trying to figure out how do we put money forward to the existing assets, but then again, still try to be identifying the future, so to say, because construction is not cheap. So these parks that you're seeing, I mean, you'll be surprised to hear probably when Stantec provides those OPCCs, the opinion of probable costs, you're probably talking about $2 to $6 million on average for you to do turnkey, and that's just the park itself. That's not introducing any infrastructure. So you're talking about bringing water, sewage, improving roads. I mean, that's a whole different cost. So it's not cheap to build parks, but it's one thing that we definitely want to make sure that what we bring to the community is a high quality park that everyone can be proud of.
Thank you, Chris. And also, you want to make sure, let's take advantage of some things that are already in motion for other projects. Also, I can assure you that Park and Recreation, as we come into the budget season this year, we're going to make sure that our CIP is informed by the master plan. This will be our guiding document. It's not going to sit on a shelf. We worked a lot with Stantec and the community to have a plan that's ready for implementation and will be used by the department.
You said one of the recurring themes that you saw was water, people wanting aquatic things in all the drafts. There was one splash pad, but splash pads are one of the only things that we have more of than we are technically expected to for our size. So why a splash pad?
So,
Not something
and I think David and Chris mentioned it, this is just a snapshot of a few of the ideas. All of those objectives will have a longer list of actions. So when we heard water, it was related to the concern of heat and shade. So one of the options that we had on the survey and in the directions was aquatics and splash pad, and that was one of the things that we heard a lot of votes. But that's why we look at the pros plan as a comprehensive look and say, okay, well, we already have enough splash pads, but we also look at what are the projections as well for growth. So that master plan does show a splash pad, but that doesn't mean that we have to put a splash pad. We'll have some of them. What we didn't show is recommendations for existing parks, or even just lower hanging fruit of like even from the operations side. Do we mainstream, an example, do we mainstream the same trash dispensers so that we all have the same branding and identity. So all of those things will be part of the master plans. I just kind of wanted to show where we are because we are still in the drafting mode of the recommendation, which is why I wanted to come here so that I could get all of those items. So yes, we do have a list of a spreadsheet that shows where we are now as a facilities and where we need to be. And adding that splash pad just kind of adds to the, we're getting there.
I filled out the survey and I definitely put water stuff on it, but I was not thinking splash pads.
Yes, so one of the things that we heard compared to the water was pools. But just looking at budget as well, like, well, maybe a splash pad is cheaper to put than an entire pool. But one of the things that we heard the most was pools, water activities more other than splash pads. So, yes.
Board Member Fishback, is that what you were thinking of when you filled out the need for water?
Definitely not.
What were you
I don't think y'all are ready for what I want, so.
Oh, we'd actually love to hear it.
Really the whole reason that I joined the Parks Board, and I've been sitting here for 3 years.
What is that reason?
And I talked to Amy and Chris about it at the dinner that we had a couple months back. Up in Round Rock, they have a giant, gorgeous park, lots of different sports options, lots of open space, nature, great things. They have something called Rockin' River. It is very inexpensive by water park standards, and it is a water park you can take your kids to where you can see them no matter where you are within like the little closed complex. So it's not like Schlitterbahn or like Kalahari or one of these things. It's super family friendly because it's inexpensive and because it has amenities within this enclosed location that can be used by your 5-year-old and your 14-year-old. That was what was in my mind when I put water things.
Well, thank you for saying that on the record.
Yes,
Because
thank
we
you.
want to capture that. That's why we're here before you all this evening.
Yeah.
I'm jealous of Rockin' River. I just don't want to live on Rock.
Now I'm jealous too.
And what in the recommendation sections, we usually add a case studies little insert. So if like when we're talking about the water parks, that's something that we can mention. Like Round Rock has a Rocking River. Check it out. Like so, those are the type of things that we want to hear today. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? So we're in the beginning stages of the recommendations. We will go back into the community maybe in about 6 weeks, a month, once we have a full list of recommendations, and we'll show visuals not only of the undeveloped parts, but what do existing parks could look like and some of these big ideas. So you'll definitely see us out there. If you have any more thoughts or questions, please let us know. We're still in the feedback and point so that next time that I come here, I present to you all a plan that is exciting, but also has answered all of your thoughts and concerns.
Do you have dates and like
The
locations
timeline?
for those next public input?
Not yet, but yes, we'll make sure to get those to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on. Receive a report, hold a discussion, and provide staff feedback regarding the Parks and Recreation Therapeutic Recreation Division programming and events. Amy Garcia.
All right, I will wait for the presentation to come on up. Adrian, it'll be the one before this one. Yeah. All right. So, good evening, everyone. Amy Garcia, Assistant Director for the Parks and Recreation Department. Today, we are here to talk about therapeutic recreation. And here to do that is our Therapeutic Recreation Coordinator, Miranda Candia. So I'll let her take it from here, and then I will ad-lib as we go. There you go.
Hello, everyone. As Amy mentioned, my name is Miranda Candia, and I'm the Therapeutic Recreation Coordinator for the Parks and Recreation Department. And so I've been with the City of Kyle for a little bit over a year now, and our Therapeutic Recreation Division is brand new to the department, so we are developing it from the ground up. And so with that being said, today I would like to talk to you about what is therapeutic recreation, why it's important, therapeutic recreation and action within the Parks and Recreation Department, and then the future of our division. So what is therapeutic recreation? Therapeutic recreation is a systematic process that uses recreation-based interventions to serve individuals with disabilities. Therapeutic recreation uses, again, those recreational activities to target 5 domains, and those are physical, emotional, social, spiritual, and cognitive. With these 5 domains, it really contributes to the overall quality of life of the population that we do serve. And so why is it important? So therapeutic recreation, or also known as TR, if you ever see that acronym, it provides opportunities for all abilities and all ages, giving them the opportunity to be a part of their community, not only within specific programming for them, but also and inclusive components. That way they're able to be alongside their peers as well as other community members. It also helps bring awareness to the community on what is therapeutic recreation as well as inclusion. And tying into that, it promotes inclusivity. So not only within therapeutic recreation are we capable of designing programs specifically for individuals with disability, but adding those inclusive components to already existing programs and events.
With all that being said, our goal is continuing to improve on quality of life. So next up, we're going to just talk to you about what we're currently doing. So therapeutic recreation in action. Miranda will hit on some of the current programs and events that we have going on, and then we'll jump into the future.
Awesome. Yes. So currently we have 4 All Abilities dances throughout the year. So we just wrapped up our A Night for Sweethearts on Friday. Our next one will be in August for our Back to School Luau. And then in October we have our Halloween Boogie. And then to finish the year we have our Winter Wonderland. And then we also kicked off our Special Olympic Texas team last year. Our delegation is called the Kyle Nighthawks. And so last year we participated in bocce and swim, and this year we will be also participating in soccer. In addition to that, we also offered bike rodeo, and that is a bicycle education program that serves all abilities, all ages, and that is done in partnership with Gisalo's Cycling Initiative. One of our other programs we also offer is the Social Squad, and that's specifically for adults 18 plus that have disabilities. And again, that is a environment that hits that one of those domains, that social domain, and gives them an opportunity to interact with their peers. Another event we do offer is the Luau Pool Party that's held in August, and that is an event open to all ages, all abilities. And then lastly, our Job Readiness Program, and that is done in partnership with our Workforce Solution. And so we participate in their program SEAL, which stands for Summer Earn and Learn. And so that gives individuals ages 14 to 22 an opportunity to really develop those work skills and be confident when they do enter the workforce. Last year, we did have an individual participate with us. He was with us from May to about mid-July, and now he's at Texas State studying journalism. So it was really cool to see his progression throughout the department. And so as we continue to improve the quality of life of these individuals, there are other aspects we are also doing besides programming. Yes, so we also are offering a sensory tent. And so a sensory tent is just a space for an individual that may be experiencing some sensory overload with loud music, loud noises, or even the big crowds, just to kind of give them that safe space to de-escalate. Within the sensory tent, it is equipped with fidget tools, mindful mazes, even noise-canceling headphones, just again to really give them that opportunity to decompress. In addition to the sensory tent, we are offering inclusive components within existing events. For example, with our upcoming Easter extravaganza, not only will the sensory tent be available to participants, we will also have an inclusive component to the hunt. So that will give individuals with disabilities an opportunity to hunt alongside their peers as well as other community members. We've also created an inclusion icon for marketing, which is displayed on the bottom left of that photo. And so this icon not only demonstrates our, showcases our commitment to inclusivity, but also communicates to community members that this program or this event is open to everyone and anyone is welcome. And we're continuously doing our commitment to improving and growing the division. And so some examples, we do have an ADA statement in place. And so that gives individuals an opportunity to request those modifications if they need it to be able to fully participate in a program or an event. In addition to that, we are partnering with our Parks Division to incorporate inclusive components into playgrounds, such as the steeplechase playground options that were released last month. And then lastly, offering therapeutic recreation internship opportunities. And this is done in partnership with local universities that do offer that therapeutic recreation degree. And some of the requirements is being a full-time student with a minimum GPA of 2.75. And so not only does this opportunity allow us to build the future of therapeutic recreation professionals, but also within our Parks and Recreation Department. And so just going into the future of therapeutic rec within the Parks and Rec Department, we are continuously expanding programs. Not only does it look like adding new programs to our division, but increasing the frequency on what we offer. So for instance, this year, Social Squad will be offering it twice a month instead of 3 times a year. And then next one is continuing to improve accessibility and the inclusive components in existing parks and events. And so what that looks like is we're working towards a sensory inclusive certification through Culture City, which also showcases to the community our commitment to inclusion. We're working on developing an inclusive camp and strengthening community partnerships as well.
Yeah, and with all that being said, that all comes with staff training. So it is key for us to develop a staff training for our Parks and Recreation Department. So they are also advocates of inclusivity and making those accommodations and small things that they can do at the park by picking up the certain piece of trash so that a pathway is more accessible to someone that uses a walker or is visually impaired. So we are working on developing our staff within to ensure that we are providing the best resources for them.
Yes, so I just want to thank you guys for your time, and I hope you enjoyed that information. If you guys are ever interested in attending one of our events or volunteering at one of the programs, just feel free to reach out. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Any questions before we go on?
I have one question.
Okay.
It's more, I guess, due to the political climate with federal executive orders being put into place, that doesn't affect city guidance at all, right?
It could affect grants, right?
Yeah, this is all access related and inclusion, so see it more in line with ADA. Those aren't going to impact our programs.
I thought ADA was part of DEI, is it not?
I don't think it is.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I think you're doing great work. And mainly,
Yes.
I'm asking because it would be a real unfortunate thing for something like this to be affected. But thank you for all that you do.
Yeah, thank you.
All
Well
right.
done. We'll go on to the next item.
Yes, good job. I'll talk to you later.
We will receive a report and hold a discussion and provide staff feedback regarding the 2025 Movies in the Park program. Amy Garcia, Assistant Director of Parks and Rec.
All right, so up next, I have the pleasure of bringing on Ronald Sinsley. He is going to give us an overview of the 2025 Movies in the Park series. Here is Ronald Sinsley.
Good evening. On the agenda we have for today, I'm going to give a recap of the 2024, give an outlook of 2025, and give you some dates and movie locations, and you can provide feedback. All right, in 2024, registration was not required. It was free to the public. We only had one cancellation due to weather, and we had over 1,000 attendees. All right, for 2025 outlook, it's still gonna be free. All movies will start at sunset. We're gonna have 10 movies in 2025, 5 summer movies, 1 Halloween, 1 holiday, and 2 dive-in movies in June and July, and an 18+ movie night, where they'll feature food vendors, raffle giveaways, and a pre-show. The new feature that we'll have is new locations. We're trying to showcase every park around the city. So it's not gonna be like it was previous years where it was just Greg Clark or Lake Kyle. All right, for 2025, this is the movie dates and the locations. As you can see, we have Lake Kyle on there, Greg Clark, but we also have La Verde and Mary Kyle Horse Park on there for Christmas. And that would be joined with 25 days of Christmas. Staff recommendations for the summer will be May 2nd, Sonic 3, June 6th, Inside Out 2, July 18th, Mufasa, August 8th, Venom, and September 5th, Willy Wonka. The 18+ movie will be The Fall Guy, the Halloween movie will be Beetlejuice, and the holiday movie will be The Santa Claus. All right. For dive-in movies, we will have Moana 2 and Captain America. They'll be in June and July. I'll open the floor for Park Board to give any feedback or recommendations for this year.
That's the worst Willy Wonka movie. It's a musical.
Yeah.
Isn't the first one kind of a musical?
I mean, it's
thinking
not
of it.
constant.
It's not. You think it's that bad? Yeah, but if y'all don't have any questions or comments about it,
One comment is like hearing about the therapeutic recreation. You said to do like a slideshow before the movie. Is there opportunity to showcase something like that? Like the therapeutic recreation, like all the good work that is being done there?
Yeah, there's definitely the opportunity, especially with that. It just depends on when people get there, but we can also add that to the slide deck. We do have TR represented along with aquatics or anything that's really going on. So yes, to answer your question directly, we do have the opportunity to put that within our presentation slide deck.
and we usually do that. Like we showcase different things before we start the movie. So right before sunset, we'll showcase the different activities and stuff that we have. But do you want more of a presentation to be shown or just a slideshow?
I mean, how she presented it was great, and I think part of I can only speak for myself, Kyle's doing a lot of great things in the Parks and Recreation Department, but it's hard to know where to look, understand what's going on, so like, how do we showcase, that's great that we're doing something that's so inclusive, right? So like, how do we showcase that at a free event, right?
Yeah. So you looking for more production wise, like, just showcasing what we're doing in the community.
And try to, yeah, exactly, because I think, like, particularly a movie, it's accessible, so you may get people going to that, like, wow, I didn't know that existed. And we have other programs too that we're doing here too, that I think would be a good touch point.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great point. And it won't only highlight recreation, it'll also highlight our parks, and so that people also are aware of what new projects we have coming on, or new amenities that we're bringing to these parks. So yeah, that is a great point. We will definitely be sure to add those things to our presentations.
Is there some way to come up with something that could be movable, that, maybe we fold up, but it has all of the, the activities and, like the inclusion has all of that, and that we just take it from event to event?
Yeah, we're working right now on a promotional plan and also helping with our rebranding. So we're hoping to be sure that we are putting our stamp on every event, and that comes with, I think you're talking about the draw information. I've seen it at agency fairs. But yes, we're working towards those types of items being at our events.
Yeah, they could just be those pull-up signs.
Yeah.
Because, he was stating that the slideshow is before the movie, and a lot of people don't come until the movie starts, so
Yeah.
that might be an opportunity for the parents who are walking around. They have something to read.
Yeah.
Have a booth set up
We're gonna give you a t-shirt.
Real quick question. Y'all have like swamp fans like during the summer?
You said swamp
Like, no, fans.
fans? Oh,
Yes, we do have the large commercial fans. Yep. Would your recommendation to put those out there?
Yeah.
So,
as far as,
I'm not gonna go sit out there at 6 o'clock with 110 degrees.
yeah,
Yeah.
we need room for generators and everything to have those
Yeah.
fans out there too. So like where the movies are.
yeah, we can look into it logistically to see if how that would work because the sound may also drown out a little bit. So, but that's something we can definitely look into.
With dry heat.
Yeah, and if we are able to do that, then I say we heavily market that.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you guys for the feedback.
All right, thank you.
Now we'll receive a report, hold a discussion, and provide staff feedback regarding general departmental updates on special events, programs, aquatics, parks, beautification, trails, conservation, and capital improvement projects. Amy Garcia.
All right, so Amy Garcia, Assistant Director. I will lead us off, and then I will pass it on over to my colleague. All right, so we're just going to give you the monthly report from February, and just a general overview. We're going to talk about our new staff. So we are a growing department, so we will highlight some of those new staff that just started this month. We will also review community events, programs such as community athletics, inclusive and adaptive, just a bit of what we just talked about just a second ago, aquatics, winter works updates, conservation, and CIP, which is the capital improvement projects. All right, to start off, do you want to do them? Yeah.
Chris Scudder, Parks Deputy Director. So we do have two new team members within the Parks TEC division, one being Mr. Jordan Stott. He is a new irrigation supervisor. He comes and joins us from the city of Lockhart, where he had 9 years of experience. He has a number of experience when it comes to just the park operations that include irrigation, plumbing, ground maintenance. This is a new position, as well as Mr. Calvin King. He is a Kyle resident, native landscape supervisor that just started with us actually this week. So he started on Monday, which gives us a total of 4 within the conservation division specific to landscaping. So he does have his bachelor degree in horticulture. He does have a big conservation ethic and has 10 plus years experience. So we're excited to bring him on board. As you can see, Jordan is the one on the top and Calvin's the one on the bottom. And I'll pass it back to Amy.
And then, like we mentioned before in the TR presentation, we are actively trying to get interns to come to the Parks and Recreation Department. So I have the pleasure of introducing Monica Martinez, which she is here with us today. If she would like to stand and wave. So she is a therapeutic recreation intern. She comes to us from Texas State, and she has over 8 years of experience as a special education teacher at the SMCISD. I would like to highlight she is doing her internship while still being a full-time teacher there at SMCISD. So I do not envy it. So thank you, Monica, for coming on board with us and choosing City of Kyle. All right, next up, I will give an update on upcoming events. So we want to invite you all out on March 4th at La Verde Park from 6 to 8. We will have live music by a band and then also food vendors out there. So again, La Verde Park, Mardi Gras celebration. And then on March 12th, we will do the one-day hiring event. Currently, it's scheduled at James Atkins Pool, but weather permitting, it may also be moved to Krug Activity Center. That's correct. Yep. All right. And then following up on our program. So we have Paint and Sip for March, scheduled for the 7th. Senior chair volleyball in partnership with the Kyle Area Senior Zone on March 7th and 21st. Story Time in the Park to kick off 2025 will be happening on March 29th. And this is also in partnership with the City Library. And I would like to extend the offer if anybody is interested in reading during one of our story times, just feel free to reach out to us. And then we will be kicking off the Youth Volleyball Clinic on March 29th, and this will take place at Lehman High School. And we will be kicking off Youth Baton Twirling registration here in March as well. And Adult Trivia Night will begin at Sitter Field March 24th through the 31st, and it will happen every Monday night until August. All right, and then on aquatics. So registration is currently open for the Kyle Kuda swim team, and that can be done on Rec Desk. We also have swim lessons. We will be partnering with British Swim School to offer swim lessons at our city pool once again, and then pool reservations are scheduled to open on March 24th, and we do have the early bird registration or reservation options available, and all of the information can be found on cityofkyle.com/recreation for under aquatics. We are scheduled to open the James Atkins Pool Memorial Weekend, which would be May 24th, and then close Labor Day weekend, which is September 1st. We are currently in the process of hiring seasonal employees, both for camp and pool. With that being said, we received the report that we're about 90% filled for both camp and pool for the summer and for aquatics. All right. And just a reminder, to be seasonal employee, you have to be 16 or older for the pool and 18 and over for summer camp. Before I pass it on back over to Chris, I would like to mention that we will be, if you haven't already registered on our Rec Desk software, we will be launching our first newsletter for the month of March, and then they will be coming monthly. And we are also working on a Kyle guide, so that we're just trying to spread the word. And so if you guys are not already, register on Rec Desk, and you will be receiving a newsletter.
Thank you, Amy. All right, so I do know that we do have a board member that will actually be in attendance, but just want to let you guys know that Parks and Recreation staff is going to be attending the TRAP State Conference. TRAP stands for Texas Recreation and Park Society, which is our governing body for the state of Texas for our profession. So we are taking 9 staff members who will be attending, trying to just get general professional development. We're looking for various ways to improve our staff, and this is one of those ways that we can accommodate that, as well as we have 2 staff members that will be attending what we call the CPSI course, or the Certified Playground Safety Inspector Certificate. It is a rigorous class and exam, same day. It's a 3-day deal, so wishing the best to our 2 employees that are going to be going there next week, but we are hoping that we'll be certifying them for that, which will be a huge thing for the city of Kyle to have that. And last but not least, if you have not heard already, the city of Kyle, Mary Kyle Hartson Park, was awarded the 2025 Lone Star Legacy Park Award, which is a big deal. It is basically they call them legacy parks because of the historical value of it. So it's a program that just started not even 10 years ago, but there's only about 20 in the state. So Mayor Kyle Hartson is going to be receiving a plaque, and where we are going to be honoring the park itself and placing that plaque at the park. So just wanted to make that known, that it was great news for us to hear that we did receive that award. So the Parks TEC winter projects, there's been a number of projects that have been underway as I keep reporting every month, and we're nearing the end of that, with it being roughly by next month, we should have all these items completed. If you did not notice already, we did add some lighting over to the Steeplechase Dog Park. It's solar lights. It turned out wonderful, so thank you for our staff that installed those, as well as we went ahead and incorporated not new fencing, but we did add a mow strip, concrete mow strip to the border at the dog park, and what that does is help our maintenance, as well as just added more enhancements to the fence itself for just long-term maintenance. So these are just things that does essentially expand the shelf life for that asset itself. We are working on right-of-ways when it comes to removing dent plant material, adding more decomposed granite within all of our trails. So those are active things that we're doing, but with it being the winter season, these are items that we are, again, trying to complete by the end of the month, and really here in the next 3 weeks should be wrapping up. And one thing to mention, we did receive our new park rule signs. This was something that we talked about, I believe, 2 months ago. The park rule sign is going to be a new sign that's going to be featured at all of our parks. So that's going to be something that's going to start getting deployed here in the next couple weeks. So be on the lookout for some new signs out in our parks. From a conservation standpoint, I know everyone loves a feral hog update. So that is one of those things that, as you all know, has been an issue. And was brought up to us in mid-December where there were several reports that were identified. So as a reminder, when these hogs are trapped, they are transported to a USDA holding facility where they're processed. In January 9th, there was 14 hogs captured. January 27th, there was 8 hogs captured. So we've been successful with the various traps that we've deployed out there, and there are still multiple reports that have been occurring. So we're still active. It's going to be, I call it groundhog operation, kind of continuing throughout the process when it comes to deploying these traps for us to capture the hogs and get them out of the park system from a safety standpoint and maintenance, really, because they do damage our parks quite a bit. Today, you did receive an update on the PROS master plan, but again, just want to highlight that roadmap of where we're trying to get to. As of right now, we're shooting for a May 2025 date. We are still working on the public engagements item when it comes to the survey results that you saw today. So we'll be coming back and reporting some dates on what those next steps look like, but just want to let you know that right now we're shooting for that May 2025 adoption date. The TxDOT Green Ribbon Program, the maintenance period did come, or I guess the 90-day warranty period did end, where from a plant maintenance standpoint, we have to go and identify and conduct a punch list. So any dead material from a plant standpoint, we need to make sure to identify those ahead of time before that warranty period. So that's been something that staff has conducted, and we are working with the contractor to replace any dead plant material. But as a reminder, from that period through 2027, that's going to be something that's going to be maintained by TxDOT. However, after that date, it's going to be turned over to the City of Kyle. And I am going to turn it over to our park planning project manager.
Good evening. Will Atkinson, Parks Planning Project Manager. So we have a few updates for you for the city's CIP tonight, and that's a capital improvements program for the Parks Department. At the last city council meeting, or excuse me, February 4th actually, city council approved the purchase of the area in red on your screen. It is a 7.4 acre piece of land technically still owned by the Silverado HOA Park. We are working through closing documents right now between the attorneys, between both parties. And we are going to use this along with the area in green to finish up design on a half-mile section of the Vibe Trail, which there's some yellow lines spanning both parks right there. And we're pretty excited about it because this section is fully funded in this year's fiscal year.
Do you know what any of those streets are, so I can kind of like...
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry.
This is in my mind.
Over at the eastern edge, the right edge of the green S is Spring Branch Drive going north-south.
Okay.
And then, when I say north-south, I mean in relation to the drawing. So, and then at the end of the two cul-de-sacs where the red lot wraps around, that is Western Cove back in there. And then the Spring Branch neighborhood on the north end. And then up in the northwest corner is the southern section of Plum Creek. So we are currently working, like I said, for closing documents on that site, and we're also coordinating with Sean Murray Polk, which is they help design our Vibe Trail and what have you to finish out that project.
I see my house.
Well, I hope you're excited because this is going to be a pretty cool project.
No, that's on the other side. I'm good.
All right, so the next one related to the Vibe Trail. Right here you have a picture of Waterleaf Park and the Button Parks along Plum Creek. The areas in green were dedicated to us as parkland when they developed those subdivisions. And with a combination of the 2020 Parks Bond for East Plum Creek Trail improvements and also our existing capital improvements program budget, we are fully designing a 1.57 mile segment of the Vibe Trail and then taking it out for construction by the end of the year to be completed by summer of 2026. It's going to have 7 neighborhood connections. It's going to start at Abundance Lane and make its way up to the Button Creek area. And we're very excited about this because it's going to kick off massive connectivity improvements for the trail system, starting in this area and then moving its way, ideally all the way up to Lake Kyle in the future.
So where it says Button Creek Park, that's Pocket Park on the map here? Or you're just saying in general?
In general, the number 5 is actually where the playground at the end of Button Creek Reserve is. I labeled that Button Creek Park around where the number 6 is for lack of a better term, because it's not technically a Waterleaf, but it was dedicated with the Button Creek Park neighborhood.
Well, I think that strip 7, does that go into that same area that Paula had indicated to have like potential soccer fields?
Yes, to the north and off the screen, it eventually ties into that. Anything north of, I can't remember what the name of that street is. It may be, no, it's the first cross street, but closest to the creek. And I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me. But anything north of that, we don't own. And that's also a gas easement. So we have to be very careful about any improvements to connect it over there. I think it's a good idea, but we're not there yet.
Are yellow and red the same? What's the difference between the yellow and red lines?
The red line is the spine of it that's going to follow the creek. And then the yellow lines are the 7 neighborhood connectors.
And all of it is to be built?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Is there any other questions for this slide? Okay. The next one is a contract that was also approved on the 7th, is the Steeplechase and Waterleaf parking lot improvements. HDR is an engineering firm that is designing these projects. At Steeplechase, we're going to have 3 existing parking lots upgraded. 2 of them are going to be with Gridlock, which is a gravel that's embedded in this plastic grid, just kind of like a geogrid, that helps the water infiltration because it's in the floodplain. But the area over by the splash pad is outside the floodplain, so that's going to be regular asphalt. But it's going to include lighting, striping for the parking lots, ADA spots. We're going to be running conduit, we believe, for the possible future, I just lost my train of thought.
EV stations.
Yes, thank you, sir. EV stations. And along with sidewalk connectivity and landscaping. So we're pretty excited about this. This also, based on the next slide, is part of, Waterleaf, which is going to have a replacement parking lot as well in the same manner over off of Abundance Lane. So we had a pre-development meeting with the planning department today, and they're kicking off the design work in the next month or so. And so this is going to be a pretty cool project happening in the next year or so. Any questions for this one? For the Steeplechase Playground, we have had a lot of feedback from the community on social media about all the input that they want to see for the playground on the 3 options. We can't really go into details about what the results are yet because it's still open. I think it's going to be open until the 28th if memory serves. But we've received a lot of positive feedback, and the community's excited about this. So keep your eyes open for whenever we bring this back in the next month or so. Lake Kensington, as you'll probably know, it's about 105 acres. We have $17 million budgeted for fiscal year 25-26. And we selected Mesa, or our city council selected Mesa, for the design and public input, which is going to begin this spring. We are working on negotiating the contract right now for this. And this is a pretty cool project as well. Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to correct, finalizing the contract. It's already been approved, but we're just working on just signatures.
Thank you, sir. Another one, Republic Drive. So we have 2 buildings out at 208, 246 Republic Drive. They're 6,600 square feet each. They were purchased back in November. This has actually updated the numbers on this. We've found another place to add an office. So we're going to have 18 offices, 6 workstations, 2 conference rooms, 3 classrooms, and a park maintenance garage and 1 break room. The permits are approved. Work started today. So I don't have any pictures to update it, but at least not on this slide anyway. But I'm starting taking pictures, and then they got the framing going up, and they are moving quickly. So we are very excited about that. And there's a couple of pictures from a few weeks ago. 1500 AC Lane. This was purchased at the end of December, and I believe y'all had a presentation for the first item. And I'm sorry to say I wasn't able to be there. I had another event I had to go to, but we are very excited about seeing this project come to fruition. After we gather all the public input, we're going to have preliminary design for it in this scope of work, and then there's going to be a second task order where they take it to full design, and then out to bid and construction throughout the end of the year. NFC Fitness Pad. I have a lot, by the way. I got a lot of projects I'm working on. We received a grant back in 2021 from the National Fitness Campaign to construct a fitness pad. We have had them, the equipment for some time now, but we are finally getting this project really rolling and settled, and it's going to be an amazing spot. This image on the screen right here from a location is just at the south corner of the existing parking lot at Lake Kyle. You can see the cabin right there at the north end, so it's going to be right there. And we've got the geotech done, the design's being wrapped up, and as soon as we get the everything resolved from a staff input standpoint, we're going to submit it for permits with the building department. And then the Public Works Department is going to construct the pad for us, and we're going to have a separate contractor actually install the equipment. And that should be March, April, so that's going to be pretty exciting. Waterleaf Park restroom. Back in 2024, Green Flush was selected to do the prefabricated restroom. This is, if you go from the Button Creek Park and you go down the super wide sidewalk down to the creek and you cross over it and you come back up the side of the hill right by the trail and the wastewater line, it's going to be right there. This is going to help augment the Vibe Trail that we're also working on, but it's a separate project that's being funded through the park bond. It will have solar panels, interior lighting, and 10 exterior lights. The current status actually needs to be updated. We just found out this week. The state has had some delays in reviewing the permits. They review prefabricated structures for us, so that we're thinking at this point it's going to be pushed back to May of this year. But as soon as we get those permits reviewed by the state and done, this permit's already in the waiting queue in the building department ready to be reviewed. So it'll be a pretty quick turnaround. From the skate park perspective, at the last council meeting, council approved the contracts for both design and construction for the skate park. Y'all have seen this a couple times, I do believe, and this is going to be a fantastic project, which will include a skate plaza, flow bowl, pump track, shade, lighting, benches, landscaping, 34,000 square feet. That's over half an acre. This is going to be probably in the top 5 to 10 parks in the state of Texas. And that's going to be part of the scope to design to. That's going to be part of it as well. Yes, we understand, Mr. Ramirez, that the popularity of this park is going to generate a need for more parking as well. So not only in this particular project will we need to incorporate parking, and they're aware of that as well, the designers, but when we start looking at the overall picture of Greg Clark Park too, we're also going to have to augment stuff.
What's nice about Greg Clark, even the way it is now, without talking about additional parking, is the way it flows, the ingress egress for the park too. Because typically what you see with skate parks is if they can't skate to the park, they're getting dropped off and left to hang out. So it's important for us to, if kids are going to be left there, to have drinking fountains that are operational, also shade, which will also be incorporated in this large concept.
Any other questions for the skate park? All right. And I'm going to hand this back to Amy because she has a couple more things to say. Thank you.
All right. So one last thing for events. We have a creek cleanup happening on March 1st, would be next Saturday. Registration is open volunteer registration is open on Rec Desk. If you are interested, we do encourage you guys to come out and volunteer. This will be led in efforts by Tamara Aquino. So we hope to see you guys out. Waterleaf Park, March 1st, and that will close us out. Any questions? That is all from me.
Are we ready to call to adjourn?
Additional questions or feedback on?
Motion and second. All in favor? Meeting closed at 8:01. Meeting? It would be the last Monday in March, which would be the 31st?
Yes, the 31st.
So at 6 o'clock, March 31st, our next meeting.